Hello, this is Kevin with Advanced Leather Solutions. With me today is Dave Sweeney. Dave is one of our technicians. We have a project of a leathercraft chair. It's actually a beautiful piece. It's badly faded, some staining going on. The most obvious component of the staining is this heavy body oil concentration that we're seeing on the headrest. To give you some sense as to what the original color of this piece was, you can see how rich it was in the area that's been protected, and our goal is to bring it back to that color. But we need to start with an oil extraction process. And so step one in the process is we're going to wipe the leather down with something that we find at a regular hardware store paint department called naphtha. This is going to take whatever gunk is sitting on the surface of the leather off first. And so it's an important thing to do. In this case, it's an unfinished leather that we're working on, but you would do this if it was a finished leather as well. So go ahead, Dave, and let's take a look and see what's happening here. Now let's take a look at the rag. You can see what's happening. It's coming up on the rag. So keep that process going, Dave, as we want to take what we found on the surface of the leather off the leather using this process, which reduces the amount of oils that we'll actually have to pull out by pulling what's off on the surface first. So you can see the differential between what Dave has pulled off.
You start out from the outer edges, kind of to block the oils so they don't migrate to the outer.
Well, you can see the effect of the oil extractor chemistry on the leather, and we actually put a very heavy coating of oil extractor onto the leather, and we're beginning to see a perimeter of white, which is what we expect. There's an area up here where we don't see the white all the way extending out, so that indicates that the oil is actually beyond that. So the next application, we're going to have to put it out further than that. The other thing that we did for our own convenience is we put plastic sheeting over the area that we're not doing an oil extractor on, and that helps capture or catch any of the flaky residue that falls off from the oil extractor chemistry, so it keeps it off of the leather itself. Now, in this application, we typically are going to wipe off what we have on there with a base of naphtha on a terry cloth rag, but instead what we're going to do this time is Dave's going to use a palette knife and scrape it off because it's such a heavy residue. So here's another way you can remove the oil extractor from the leather. So notice what he's doing. He's just basically using a palette knife. You could use a butter knife and accomplish the same thing. The idea is to get the residue, that powdery residue, off of the leather, allowing us to have access to the leather for a next application. Now that we have the residue scraped off the leather, we're going to now apply the oil extractor to the leather using the same technique that we've used before. And that is to put it onto the leather using, in this case, a foam brush. We're going to actually do an application from seam to seam, focusing on the headrest pillow, not beyond that headrest pillow. The idea of us doing that is because we saw that there was some migration of oil beyond outside of the area where it was plainly obvious, and so we just want to make sure that we apply the oil extractor to all leather surfaces where there's a potential for that oil to have migrated. We'll see when this dries the result of that, as it will dry as we expect it to, as a white powder in the area where there isn't any oil. But it'll identify for us the areas. Okay, so now we're ready for our next pass of oil extractor, but before we put it on, take a look at what we've got going on here. We see areas where we still have some degree of oil that's showing, and areas like that is another example. But then we have areas where we have a high degree of the whitish residue that we're actually looking for. So this process has actually moved along faster than we expected. This is only our third application of the oil extractor, although we did put down very, very heavy coats of oil extractor. So go ahead, Dave, and put the next coat. So here we are on the next phase of our oil extraction process. You can still see that there's some areas or pockets of oil that are still in the leather, but we've made a lot of progress in getting this oil extraction process to completion. One of the ways that we actually draw the residue off of the leather is using a vacuum cleaner, and so we want to demonstrate using that. Vacuum cleaner is going to be pretty noisy, but just you'll understand the concept here. So Jason, go ahead and let's vacuum this up. So what that did is it allowed us to pull a lot of the loose particles off of the leather and it makes for the process to move quicker. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take the remaining off with naphtha. You'll notice in the instructions in doing a kit that we are always talking about naphtha as the proper product for taking the residue off of the leather. There's a picture of the can, as you can see. So Jason, let's show application technique. Now, naphtha is a fairly high evaporation solvent, and what it does is it helps to pull the residue off, but it also is a degreasing agent of its own right. And so it is a good product to use in pulling residue off of the leather that has some greasy component to it. Why don't you show the cloth, Jay, so we can see the oil that's actually coming up. You see that? There's an indication of the oil transferring up. We actually draw the residue off of the leather is using a vacuum cleaner, and so we want to demonstrate using that. Vacuum cleaner is going to be pretty noisy, but just you'll understand the concept here. So Jason, go ahead and let's vacuum this up. So what that did is it allowed us to pull a lot of the loose particles off of the leather, and it makes for the process to move quicker. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take the remaining off with naphtha. You'll notice in the instructions in doing a kit that we are always talking about naphtha as the proper product for taking the residue off of the leather. There's a picture of the can, as you can see. So Jason, let's show application technique. Now, naphtha is a fairly high evaporation solvent, and what it does is it helps to pull the residue off, but it also is a degreasing agent of its own right. And so it is a good product to use in pulling residue off of the leather that has some greasy component to it. Why don't you show the cloth, Jay, so we can see the oil that's actually coming up. You see that? So our guess is that we're almost done, but probably not completely done, and we'll be able to isolate those areas where it's remaining with the oil extractor on our next pass. Well, we're getting to the tail end of the process, but we still have some areas where it's evident that we have oil. You can see, for example, right here, there's some evidence of oil, and here it's much more obvious that we have oil. And so we're going to continue the process now to put it through the extraction process. So the process of application is consistent. We're wiping on the oil extractor. In this case, we're using a foam brush. You can use a sponge, or you can use an old paintbrush. Works equally as effectively. The more material that you put on, the more aggressive it's going to be in actually drawing those oils out of the leather. We're on the last phase of the oil extraction process on our chair. This is what it looks like when it's completed. So we have all the oil taken out, and Jason is going to vacuum the residue off of the piece. Now that that is done, we're going to wipe the piece down with naphtha. For our purposes, what we did is we transferred some liquid naphtha into a plastic container just for our ease of use. So Jason is putting it onto a shop rag and is applying it to the leather and taking the naphtha, taking the remaining residue off of the leather. Now, when this process is completed, there's still going to be some slight haziness to the leather as a result of the tiny particulate matter of the oil extractor chemistry after it is dried. And that's nothing to be alarmed about, but yeah, you can see right in there. That haziness is to be expected. It is normal, and when one goes through the priming step with a primer, then it dissipates completely. So Jason is accelerating the drying process of the naphtha. Clearly, there's a haziness on the leather, which is to be expected, and is not going to in any way interfere with the next steps of the process, which is priming and coloring the leather.